I almost didn't see you. This is Chris from MajorHifi, and this is just the Fourte Blanc, the newest IEM release from 64 Audio. $3,700, only 500 units of it made. It's really not a big deal. This is just my life. I get to try stuff like this all the time. All right, well, now that I had my moment to gloat about actually getting to try this thing, this is the Fourte Blanc from 64 Audio. Only 500 units of it are getting made, goes for $3,700. It is the sequel to the Fourté Noir, which came out in 2019. And I am pretty excited to give these a try because despite how it may seem, I actually have not listened to them yet. I was waiting for you guys. So I want to give you guys my candid first reactions to how they sound. But before that, we'll go over some of the very impressive technology that's inside of these, as well as what's inside the box. So let's get into that. In 2016, 64 Audio released the TIA Fourté, the first IEM with a tubeless design. If you're wondering what that means, here's an example of the clearly visible tubes on the Moondrop S8 IEM. They're normally responsible for directing sound from the driver to the ear canal. The Fourté line does away with these tubes in favor of specially designed acoustic chambers. This design is intended to cut back on resonance and distortion, and 64 Audio says it's also responsible for an expanded soundstage and a smoother frequency response. The Fourte Blanc consists of 4 drivers, 1 dynamic and 3 precision balanced armatures. A 4-way crossover system delegates a specific frequency band to each driver. Bass is sent to the dynamic driver, while mids, high mids, and highs are sent to respective armature drivers. The Fourte Blanc differentiates itself from the Fourté Noir with a new implementation of the dynamic driver, which 64 Audio says improves the low-end response and further reduces distortion. Like the Noir, however, only 500 units of this are getting made. But if you miss your chance to snag one, there's always the TIA Fourté. Now, let's see what you get in the box. The box sleeve has this nice, coarse sort of material that feels like it could be on the sleeve of some limited edition vinyl. Then, opening up the box, you get your Fourte Blanc IEMs, an ear tip organizer with 3 foam and 6 silicone ear tips, this very firm leather-bound case with a unique felt grip, a cleaning tool, a wire clip, some light reading, a 2-pin to 3.5 millimeter pearl premium cable, and this 2-pin to 4.4 millimeter silver core cable. All right, new day, new shirt. I promise that I held off on listening to these yesterday just so that I could give you my candid reaction to them. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, wow. These were not what I was expecting them to sound like, actually. I was expecting like a really serious sound signature, if that makes sense. Like one that's really spacious, that's like, you know, do a little carve here, a little carve here, and make sure, you know, everything is as transparent as possible. And it's really not like that. It's a really energetic, driving sound. It's like really loud lows that are kind of like reinforced even with the low mids. And it's just this really intense low energy layer that's kind of going on with it. It also seems like the way that they boosted the I guess like high mids and the lows were like perfectly tailored for like electric bass transients and also kick drum transients. I was just listening to Time, the Frank Moody remix by Cartel. And there's like a very heavily picked electric bass in it. And it brought out the transients of that pick hitting the string like really nice and crisply. It also brought out like the low-end sub energy in the bass. It wasn't U-shaped, though. I wouldn't say it's like a U-shaped frequency response because there's still ample mids in it. There's a lot of everything. There's nothing in it that sounds cut or scooped, but there is stuff in it that sounds boosted, if that makes sense. I know everything is relative, but there isn't like any thin or like weak part to this sound. It's like really, like I said, just thick and driving. I'm going to listen to a few more tracks. I was listening to a pretty funky track with like a lot of layers in it. that kind of had a driving sound to begin with. So I'm going to listen to some like quieter, more laid back stuff and get back to you in a minute. All right. Well, took that as an opportunity to do a couple of hours of listening, but I'll start with the quieter stuff first, since that's where I left off. I listened to the track "If You Need To Keep Time on Me" by Fleet Foxes. It's for the most part just an acoustic guitar and vocals with, you know, some piano parts. There's a lot of reverb in it. And I found that the like warmer tones, the kind of like humming energy of the acoustic guitar was brought out the most. There were still plenty of strummy transients in it, but those were mostly natural, kept like a pretty balanced sound, but it was really the warmth in the guitar that got brought out so much. So yeah, very warm, thicker sounding acoustic guitars and pianos. Vocal fundamentals were very loud. There was more emphasis on the fundamental than on the fry. So yeah, definitely a pretty full mids profile, but slants more towards the low mids. But high mids are still there, just a little more natural sounding. Low mids have that boost. As far as lows go, the lows and the subs, definitely the subs, were probably my favorite part of this sound signature. I was listening to Crush by Jai Paul, and that has an electric kick drum in it with a really like boomy decay that is pretty sine wave-like. It's really deep and siney. And it's in mono, but when it hit, it felt like the frequencies, those really big bass frequencies, were coming from both sides and like shooting like an arrow. Some kicks more than others like really hit this sweet spot where it just meets in the middle of your head, strikes this very like physical, heady sensation. And again, without the low mids, you know, pulling back at all, it's really, really driving that low end. That's the biggest theme that I could find across all my listens with this, the low end. I also listened to some metal on these. I was listening to the album Meta by Car Bomb, and once again, this is the theme here. It was lows and the low mids and that underlying like subterranean energy that was brought out of it. The really like toothy, crunchy, distorted guitars. That higher end, that crunch, had a pretty natural balance to it, but it was the kick and the bass and the lower parts of the distortion that were really coming through strongly. And then on the other side of things, I also listened to Say So by Doja Cat on these. And again, I was surprised to see that it was actually, even though she's a pretty high-pitched singer, it was the lower fundamentals in her voice that were getting brought out. But I did notice on that track that like the snare drum clap track on it was really, really snappy. So I think that high mid boost that happens on basically all headphones, it's happening a little later on in the frequencies. It's not so much happening, you know, around 1,000. It's maybe happening, you know, a little further down, maybe at like 3,000 or 4,000. I'm just giving you those numbers for a reference. I don't know what the frequency response looks like for this. I didn't look at that. So yeah, there is the high mid emphasis. It just happens higher up than what might be normal. Not so high that it got shrill. I never experienced like shrillness with these. And actually, when I used my test track, which if you've heard me talk about this ad nauseum, I'm sorry, but it is the best highs test track. Cranked by Panda Bear, super shrill, high frequency in there. That didn't come across really loudly. It was still audible. So I think there is an emphasis placed in the highs, but that roll-off happens later on, which is where that frequency I'm talking about probably resides. And that roll-off is kind of sharp. But it leaves so much of the other highs intact and even boosts them more than other IEMs, which I personally really liked. I thought it gave them a really snappy sound. Actually, the treble on this kind of reminded me of the Sennheiser IE900 IEMs. Also great IEMs, but don't get confused. It doesn't sound like that. It's a much fuller sound than those. It was just the kind of like tappy, really crisp treble on it that reminded me of those. Also, sorry for going a little out of order today, but lastly, to go over the look and feel on these, they might look plastic from that distance just because of the white color on them, but once you get your hands on them, they're very obviously metallic. They feel really sturdy, but at the same time, they're also very noticeably lightweight, like very, very lightweight. Also, I like the cable that these come with. It's, let's see, it's a 4-way braided cable, has this like silvery, whitish sort of like glimmer to it. Goes well with the buds. You know, buds look themselves. I don't think they look bad. Not really my style, but it's somebody's style. And then I'll get you a closer shot of this. Something that I think is really cool with these is you can see that the filter, like the end of the acoustic nozzle, it rides up very close to the brim of the ear tips. So there's not much like ear tip silicone material that it needs to pass to get to your ear. And I think that coupled with the tubeless design on some of these drivers, it's just a kind of cool concept to think about, that the whole point of it is that it's supposed to be going straight from the driver to your ear, has that really direct acoustic pathway. So that's just a fun little observation that I made that I thought was worth pointing out. Also want to remind you guys that you can use Chris10 as a promo code to get 10% off an order from Audio 46. But to conclude, yeah, these get the MajorHifi Gold. These really were excellent IEMs, amazing full balance without masking or muddying too much, just a very energetic, great sound. I think it's worth the hype. But anyway, thanks for watching. This is Chris with MajorHifi. If you want to see more reviews and videos like this, remember to click like and subscribe below, and I'll see you next time.